Hello, guys. Welcome to the Ranking Heroes, a podcast where we discuss different strategies right with the experts behind them. I'm pleased to introduce you to an expert, enterprise SaaS leader, a guy who has more than 10 years of experience in customer success, account management, product marketing, and he's basically combining all the knowledge and previous experience to get the best possible results. Meet Eric Glass. He comes from Austin, Texas. Eric, so nice having you here in our podcast. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. This is very exciting, and I've been following you guys for a while. I love the show, and I am very happy that I'm able to be on it.
Thank you so much. And soon we will be having an AI that will be reading all the transcripts of our episodes, and people will be able to chat with it right from our podcast page on
That's
our
awesome.
website that is going to be live this month.
Yep,
I mean, next one.
that's fantastic.
Let's start by a short introduction. Can you tell us a bit about yourself? How did you end up in product marketing? What is your main motivator? Things like that.
Yeah, so let's go way back. So I am I'm much older than what my face and my my outfit would lead on. Right, I was my birthday. I won't age myself, but it was in the '80s. And so I started my career at a marketing agency here in Austin, Texas, where I spent, the better part of a decade driving back then, we were one of the only agencies out there that was doing what we called white glove service for webinars, right? So we would produce and host webinars for our clients, and I would run, myself and my team at the time was running 500 webinars and 50 virtual events a year. We had somebody come in, they decided to shift directions of the agency, which was, it happens, business, And then I jumped over to one of my partners. It was at an expo. It was the time. I spent a year on the product team there. And then that was known that I was going to do that and help, kind of rebuild the reporting engine to make it back at the time more Web 2.0. It was very Web 1.0. It's weird to say because we're now going through the Web 3.0 transition, and I think Web 3.0 is going to go a lot of the ways like Betamax or HD DVD, right? We're gonna very quickly transition Web 4.0, but we can get into that later. And then help them build out their what was the account management function at that org, and then that transitioned to the customer success team, and then that company was acquired. And then I stayed with the acquiring company running our global customer success team that was, from 2013 to 2023. And then my last year there, I had gotten a little bit, the CS world had gotten a little stale, so a product marketing role opened up. And then I've stuck with it since, and then made the jump over to call review, where I'm currently... today's my last day. I'm moving on to do kind of my own thing. But did sales enablement and sales engineering while I was here. And then the last 18 months I've been doing product marketing. And to answer your question more succinctly, I am incredibly ADD. And I think the product marketing role is for anybody who is out there that's ADD and thinking about getting into it. The thing that I love about it the most is it truly is a cross-functional, like it's an ADD person's dream, right? Because you get to play in the product, you get to play with the sales team, you get to play with the CS team, you get to play with you get to touch everybody in the org, and you get to pull on those narrative threads from every org to build the story of whatever the organization that you're working for is, right? Like, it doesn't matter what it is, and really get to understand, not only get to play with the product, but get to play with all the different systems that are out there that let you tell the stories, with what like you guys do. And then, thumbing through Instagram, all the different tools out there. I think right now, product marketing is probably one of the most exciting roles to be in an organization because of the way the systems are changing, and it's really at the forefront of how you can transform an organization, not just from sales or a marketing or demand gen standpoint, but really ultimately how your product team thinks, how your sales team thinks, how your CS team thinks. Product marketers are poised to sit there and do all of the things inside an org. And I think it's going to be incredibly important to have a very solid product marketing team in the next couple of years, especially with all the shifts with, dare I say it, that little thing that's kind of taken over the world, AI.
That people are getting scared of. And what you just said, it looks like the being a product manager, product marketer, you are getting like in touch with all the organization or departments. Like you need to
Mhm.
get feedback from everybody. And to me, if you ask me, I think like now that you said that you're starting your own thing, good luck with that.
Thank you.
I'll be happy to like follow your journey and everything. But I do think that based on that, if you know customer success, sales, product marketing, and you've been in touch with all the departments and their heads, that means that you do understand. I don't want to say like 100% from each department, but you get a full picture that you can like have by having all the knowledge from all the
Hmm.
departments, which makes you a
Yeah.
great founder. That will help you. All the skills and knowledge will certainly help you scale your own business. And I gotta ask you this: when someone outside of the industry, let's say your mom's friend, asks what you do, how do you usually explain it?
So right now, like for the last couple of years, it's been I'm in marketing, and then even then they kind of glaze over like what the hell is marketing even do? Now it is I am helping founder-led companies really understand the systems that they have and how to leverage them is kind of what my core messaging is. It's one of those things where I've already got a client that I'm working with very closely. They have an amazing track record, an amazing product, but they don't know how they're founders, right? They don't have time to leverage all the tools that they've invested in over the last couple of years. So I'm coming in and helping them build out what they're calling the RevOps function, but I think it's much more than that, right? They have 17 different narrative threads that they have to pull together. So I'm leveraging kind of all of my, like you said, my fact that I've sat in account management and run, it was a sales team and then it transitioned to a customer success team, but I've also been in product and I've also done marketing back at the agency. So it's one of those things where I'm helping, founders really understand the systems they have in place and how to leverage them effectively along the stack to get the most one out of the investment, but really ultimately drive revenue into their organization, which is going to help them grow and get past that get past that really early stage hump where it's like they're having those moments of doubt on, man, is this even going to work? There's so much noise out there, Nebojsa, that is just, you and I were talking about it before, my Instagram feed or my TikTok feed right now is I can't go 2 clicks without seeing somebody who's trying to sell you a school package or talking about the latest Claude code or the latest Claude code, the latest Claude skill set that you need to go get this GitHub repository because it's going to replace your whole marketing team or it's going to replace your whole product team. Yes, great. That's awesome. But when you get that, what do you actually do with it, right? How do you leverage it effectively? And I know looking at the questioning before you sent me those over there, we're going to talk about this a little bit more in depth, but I think that's one of the big things is there's so little guidance on what actually to do and how to layer AI in effectively to not replace people, but really make your people that much more productive. When I think
Fully
about,
agree with
yep.
you. Fully agree with you. Someone once asked me, "Do you think AI is gonna replace people?" I said no, but people who know how to use it will replace people who doesn't know how to
Yep,
use it. People
exactly.
who don't know how to use it, yeah, they will be just replaced. But that's how people should be thinking. And I do think that like downloading GitHub repository and like having your AI working on it, it's just it won't work that easy.
No.
What I think can work, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like if you are implementing let's call it like a memory layer on top
Yep.
of your channels, one of your channels, which can get all the data from that channel, from the audience, from what your team is doing, and then making that AI understand the goal. And you need still to lead it, but at some point it will be enough efficient so you can really rely on it.
Yep. Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
that's the big thing that a lot of people are missing is, to your point, is that getting your data in order. That's the first step of any AI journey, and I'll sing that. I'll scream that from the top of the roof every day. Is if you implement AI, and I've seen this time and time again, and I had a conversation with a mentor, an associate of mine, who has an AI ICP company, Align ICP. They, their whole deal is the first step is getting your data in a place, because to your point, if you are, I'm trying to think of like a good analogy, like Italian brain rot, right? So if your data is all brain rotted out and it's all over the place and it's in silos, and it doesn't exist, and it exists in those silos and it's not all one area, it's going to be, your AI is going to be a mess, and it's not going to be able to form that memory, and it's not going to build, right? I think there's a lot of cool tools that are out there doing that. And I have another buddy that works for one of the big data layer companies, we were talking about this the other day, and he was like, dude, he's like, I'm so worried about my job getting replaced. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you guys are one of the companies that everyone needs right now, because you take all of the systems and put the data in one place that then allows these companies to go build the AI on top of that and have a brain and have the memory of what the context is, which you see so many marketers out there. And I think one of the things I absolutely agree with right now is you have to be able to create that unified vision across the org. You have to have not only your internal operating data for that AI to reference, but your customer data for that AI to reference. So it really has the context of what it's going to do when you ask it to do something. And just thinking about it from a marketing standpoint, right? There's so many times where I've been talking to different marketers over the last, year or so since this really took off. And they're asking me, Eric, what are you doing to get the same result over and over again? Because I keep having to dump in every time I ask ChatGPT, or every time I ask Perplexity or Claude or whatever, I've got to give it 52 documents and then re-enter my prompt. And I'm like, guys, well, you've got to, at a base level, use the functionality for what it is, and know that the systems are designed to just be helpful. Yeah, I'm thinking about the right now, the Claude Super Bowl ad where they were, taking a shot at ChatGPT,
Yeah.
but for the ads. But you have to give it that context layer, or it's not. It's just going to give you the answer that you're looking for, and then all of a sudden, now what you've developed is an echo chamber that's not going to be helpful and not going to develop anything that's useful for you, and you're going to end up eating more time and more expense in tokens or hours or however you want, having to retrain it for every prompt, versus if you have a consolidated layer that and some governance around it, you're going to be able to feed it that information and get the same repeatable outcome, which is what you're looking for out of these systems. And I think that's the biggest place where they can turn a regular employee, a high achieving employee in your organization, into a superhuman. It very much is. I'm a huge nerd. So I'll use the Tony Stark analogy, right? Like, Tony Stark was only as good as what Jarvis could do in the background for him,
Yeah,
right?
that's a very good analogy.
And now everybody has the potential to have their own Jarvis. And I
Yeah,
think that
exactly.
is simultaneously an amazing thing, but also a terrifying thing at the same time, for a lot of
Yeah,
people.
as you previously mentioned, internet is flooded with nonsense,
Yep.
like useless stuff. The simplest example for AI to be working with the real data is like, go to ChatGPT and just ask him, write me a LinkedIn post on that topic. That ChatGPT doesn't know who you are, doesn't have your previous post, can't use your tone and voice, doesn't know your
Yep.
audience. So like instead feed it with all the previous posts, feed it with your audience, feed it with the topics that you are discussing in your LinkedIn, and then the output will significantly improve. That's just like the simplest
Yeah.
example that I could think of in this moment.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's my mom recently got into this, and she was asking it all these questions, and she started going down the road of asking it for like trading advice, and it started giving her answers. Well, she made an investment, and that investment went completely sideways. And I went back and I looked at the conversation, and then I went and into her settings in ChatGPT, and they were blank. And I go, what did you do here? And that's exactly to your point, right? Is there's so many people who miss the context of you have to give the systems something to work with, so they know who you are, what you're saying, what your voice is. I think you said that perfectly. Is feed it something that you've done, something that you've written, emails that you've written, so it can understand what that is, and then that's just going to improve outcomes. And that's at a base. I think we're beyond that, and your audience is a little beyond that. But even if anybody's out there just listening, who's starting this journey now because they've seen something where they're like, oh, I'm going to jump in now. Learn how to set up the projects and the systems and the settings properly, so you have that context, so it knows who it's talking to. Because the way that I look at it, and the way I actually taught my daughter how to do this, is the AI is a friend that you just met, right? And so you're going on this journey, and that friend has to get to know you. And the only way it has to get to know you, it's not like a normal conversation you're going to have where it's going to learn about you, because the systems aren't asking questions yet. They will, I think, start getting there, right? When you fire up a subscription, you know, and I've put this on the ideas portal, and I've talked about it before, is, it should have a conversation with you to know who you are, what you're about, and things like that, during the onboarding flow of any of these tools. I think we'll get there. But I was telling her, like, and it's amazing to watch the stuff that my daughter's built. She's built an entire educational team that has, a school director, and then she has an agent now for each of she has an agent now for each of her subjects. So she'll ask the school director a question, and then it's like, oh, it's about chemistry. I'm going to go get the answer from the chemistry agent, and then it gives her a self-led tutorial on how to educate herself. And I watched her go from struggling in chemistry, and she's 16, struggling in chemistry, so sophomore level chemistry in high school, to an A student. And this wasn't the educator doing it. And that's just one like micro example of the power of this type.
Whoa,
Which
well,
is,
she knows how to use it properly.
yeah, and
Like from zero knowledge, from like a little knowledge in chemistry, she became Walter White.
yeah, exactly. And it's crazy to think about some of the potential of what, and I can't remember what podcast it was that I was listening to, but they were talking about um, the what AI gives, the power that we have now at our fingertips to go and
Yeah.
gain knowledge, is, you want to learn how to do something now with a little bit of prompting and a little bit of just, I mean, just the sheer,
Yeah, that's
if you
crazy.
have the willpower to go do it, you now have the tools at your fingertips to learn everything that you need to do. And it's just going to get more powerful, every single day, as long as we don't run out of water or power, before we before we get to that point.
Yeah. Knowledge started becoming more accessible year over years, and then when the AI came, then it became like very accessible. I know that some popular US university, they even publish YouTube videos of their classes and exams and everything, and you can basically watch a video, and it's the same way as you are really there attending the
Yeah.
class. So it's crazy, like
Yep.
that's
Yeah, and I think that's layering onto that. Just before we move on, is I think about the universities, the master class that are all video led now. What we're doing with AI and the things like that, you can take that video and that transcript and feed it in, and now because there's a lot of people like I learn very well from watching video, I learn very well from listening. But there's a lot of people who actually have to have a conversation to learn. Like my wife is one of these people, right? And I have a friend down the street who has to like be hands-on to really get it. And that's where a lot of these, I think about some of the master classes or some of these things that are out there. I think the most successful education stuff, right, now with AI is the ones where they've developed the bot in such a way that you're having a natural conversation with it. And I've turned on speech, on Claude, on GPT, on Perplexity because I play with all the legacy systems, and then even some of the open source models where I'm just able to have a conversation and sit here and brainstorm. And I've got an always on teammate, that is, and I haven't gotten too deep into it, but some of the stuff with like the building the brain using some of the Obsidian stuff, that's out there and some of the other tools where it's building these connections across the board. And I'm like, man, this is so cool. And it is very much going back to the Tony Stark, like, the Jarvis analogy where, I'm going to walk into my office and do what are we doing today? And it's just going to
Wake
run
up.
it down. And, some of the cool systems that are out there that are being developed, it's for me, going back to my ADD, it's a struggle to focus, sometimes on the tasks that I have to get complete because I'm like, oh, what is this tool or what is this tool? And I fall into that trap myself on like, oh, I need a skill to go do this. Did somebody write it or do I need to go build it? And then I end up spending the afternoon not doing anything that I'm supposed to be doing, but building a new skill, because I want it to work exactly how I want it to work. But anyway, go on. I digress.
Yeah, I mean, it really helped, and I believe that it's helping a lot in health industry.
Hmm.
I can't even believe what will AI do in the next years when it comes to the health
Sure.
industry. As basically right now, it can learn sign language in like less than a minute and be able to communicate
Yep.
with deaf people. It's crazy,
Yep.
like how the AIs can be used, and I like when I see it used like that, but there are many bad examples like hacking or like some topics that I don't want to even mention.
Yeah. Yeah. There's
So
there's always going to be bad actors, and I think this is one of those areas where, um, the community is doing a very good job of curtailing that right out of the gate, which I think is has been fun to see, especially in some of the open source model stuff. Because it really is the dawn of a new frontier that we're opening up that's going to very rapidly, change how, and I'm thinking about just SaaS organizations in general and how they're all, sitting around, and there's going to be a lot of disruption over the next couple of years because it's no longer software as a service; it's software on demand. Oh, I want to sit down. I'm an executive. I need a Hey, Claude, I need you to go build me a dashboard. Or if they're using Cowork, whatever the tool is you're using, I want to see all of the things that have happened over the last week across my org. Show me, and it builds a dashboard or an artifact right there for you. And then you can say, all right, update this thing weekly. And there's so many things that so many people are just discovering. And I think now it's just a matter of willpower. And it's no longer, tied to, oh, I've got to go to this team or I've got to go to that team, or, organizations have to start thinking about how do I enable my teams to work better, not from a cross-functional standpoint, but how do you build the system and layer it, going back to our data, how do you layer in that data so that the teams are enabling each other in this workflow and the insights are presented, across the org in a way that's consumable and not overwhelming.
yeah, I mean, it's something that we already implemented like 3 months ago.
Yep.
Less than 3 months ago, we added that memory layer on top of our like communication channels like Slack. We
Hmm.
even have like our own chatbots and all the information there from our company, from our clients, etc. And we do have these like memory consolidation that's happening during the night when AI analyzes everything that it learned from each team member
Yep.
and gets like a full picture and better understanding. And every day it's becoming like better and better with its output. And it's crazy to see how, for example, I say at the beginning of every month in the first 2 weeks send me 2 reminders about the clients that didn't pay the invoices or something like that, and he will just do it
Yep.
every single month moving forward as he remembers everything.
I gotta ask,
So
what'd you name your AI teammate?
Yeah, it's heroic AI basically.
Okay, got it.
I
All
was
right.
thinking about renaming it to one of the Greek gods because the whole brand goes with
Sure. Yep.
with
Yep.
mythology and everything. But I know people are naming it different names.
What
Ours is
of
just
all
like
of all the
heroic
Greek
AI.
what Greek god were you gonna settle on?
Like the most like famous one, the Zeus.
Okay, you're gonna call it Zeus. All right. I
Yeah,
like that.
maybe Zeus will be the name. Yeah, Zeus. So yeah, cool. So my next question, and I was thinking about this a lot as it happened to me as well as I was like working in different roles in my experience, and then I learned something, and then I moved to another role, and the same problem or situation happens, and I see it from completely different perspectives. So I want to ask you, before leading product marketing and GTM at scale, you worked across sales, account management, customer success, and sales engineering roles. How did moving through those different functions shape the way you think about the customer journey end to end?
Yeah. So I think the most interesting thing from my perspective there and sitting in all the different seats that I've gotten to across my career, which I'm very blessed to have a lot of my, a lot of my mentors are like you. I have a camp of mentors that look at that as, maybe a negative because the dawn of hyper specialization is everybody wants somebody who's got years of experience in this. I think the advantage it gives me is it allows me to very easily see what the customer is actually seeing, and it's given me a focus on outcomes versus just tooling. I think about some of my peers who maybe have only been in marketing, right? Where this is not a negative by any means, right? And anybody can go get the knowledge of what their customers is doing at any point in time. But I've always got that end goal and what is the outcome that we're driving at in my mind is, that's been kind of ingrained in me. The founder of the agency that I was at was very keen on, we're not selling a product, we're selling a relationship and we're selling an outcome, right? And we were back, the agency that I worked at, we were one of the very first like true demand gen agencies that embraced marketing automation platforms. We were one of Eloqua's very first partners when they were just getting started. And everything that we did is about outcomes. So I think that's the biggest thing that I've taken away as I've moved from, running that webinar team and virtual events team to, the tools are there and the features are always going to be there and there's always going to be a new shiny object or whatnot. But you got to step back and you really got to think, what is the outcome that we're driving to for the customer? Because, ultimately, and then two, on the flip side of that, from just because CX is not just about what the customer is experiencing, but it's also what you've got to look at CX from an internal standpoint too. Because while you're maybe making something easier for the customer, how is that changing how your customer success managers operate? How is that changing how your support team operates? We might be creating what we perceive as less friction for the customer, but in reality, it's causing more friction for the internal team because of a slight change that we made. So anybody like that's sitting cross-functionally, especially in the product marketing role, go have conversations with your customers, go get that feedback, go understand how how your product is driving to the outcomes that they're trying to achieve. But then also don't forget to look, aim that lens internally. One of the things I've done at both my previous role and the role that I'm in now is I have a customer advisory board that is, our top, a lot of times customer advisory boards are made up of your top customers or the top revenue drivers. um, I don't always focus on them. Yes, they're great customers. Yes, they need they absolutely need love, but you also need to go to some of the customers. I've saved more customers over the years by going and inviting maybe not the highest paying customers, but customers in your service addressable market or your service, in in your TAM that have opportunity for expansion, and using a customer advisory board is a great way to go and land and get that expansion because now they see you care. But also form an internal advisory board, right? Go sit down with your sellers, go sit down with your CS team, go sit down with your guys, because your assumptions from a campaign level, your assumptions from a what you're doing as a marketing professional, they're only one piece of the equation, right? The best go-to-market teams in the world right now are made up of not just, traditional marketers or traditional PMs or those classic trained guys, but they are leaning heavily on their sales teams. They're leaning on their enablement teams. They're leaning on their support teams. And that's a lot of what I do, when I go talk to these orgs is, how are you putting your, plan together? How are you going to market in not just what you're doing from a marketing standpoint, but how is that what is the outcome that you want your sales team to get to? There was one org I talked to a couple months ago, just at a meetup here in Austin, where the marketing team was there was a lot of friction between marketing and sales because there was no alignment on, the marketing team was going after this because they had a particular KPI that they needed to meet. Well, they weren't understanding the throughput on how that campaign was not identifying what the sales team actually, who they were selling to, and there was no conversation there. Young organization, but it was one of those things where, and you see that happening, and it's weird because it's the same conversations I've been having for 20 years now, where you have to have alignment. Not only a lot of people focus on top down alignment, but you have to have bottom up alignment as well, right? If the people that are doing the work for you are not reading from the same sheet of music you're reading from, then you're going to have an issue when it comes to the end of the year, and whether you are a solo entrepreneur, or you're reporting to a board, or you have investors that you've got to make sure that everyone up and down the chain is singing on that same sheet of music, or you're going to have, a disconnect somewhere along the lines. And I think it's getting easier and easier to do that, right? It was, it used to be like spreadsheets were just crazy, out of control, at the agency I was at, but that was the time we lived in, right? And now though, you've got 100 tools at your disposal for, like, you with Slack and your, we'll call it Zeus for the rest of the conversation. You can ask Zeus at any point in time what it is that you need to do, and how to do it, and go from there. But sorry,
Yeah. And
I went off on a
regarding that,
tangent.
I do still think that there needs to be a human touch, like a
Absolutely.
leadership call where you have all the leadership team comes in, and then they all share reports. When we do like leadership teams meetings, I told my team, I don't wanna ask you anything. I want you to tell me what's up, what are you doing, do you have any bottlenecks, like what can we do to improve it, things like that. So like I'm tired of having the same calls every single week and me asking the same things every single time. So I don't want to do that. Now I want you to step up and share what you're working on.
Yep.
And that really improved. Like not only that they do more, but also how everybody is aligned with each other's work, and they see where they depend on each other, and like everything goes
Yeah.
much smoother. So I have two follow up questions. First is, which function gave you the clearest view of where GTM usually breaks down? And the second is, what do marketers often miss when they haven't worked in sales or customer support?
So I would say on the first one, the one that's given me the clearest perspective is probably my time as CS, right? I think was invaluable, because I got to see how, the sales team is very good at, and the best sellers in the world are very good at building that value and building that hype and then closing that deal. That's what they're bred to do. They're born to do, and that's their goal in the role. The product team is out there building the things that enable the sellers to go sell and solving the problems, where the CS team is actually in the function. And the way that I ran my CS org is very much they were consultatory partners to what our clients were doing, which is running. We had one customer that was running almost 1,000 webinars a year with us, right? So they were embedded. I encouraged them as much as they could to embed in the team that is operating our platform, so you really understand everything that's going on. And I think that brought back to going back to your next question is the marketers. The thing that I've noticed that they miss is that outcome, because you have a lot of marketers that don't ever log into the product, right? You're there, you're driving a function, you understand the functionality, you look at the spec sheet, you look at the PRD, you look at what product gives you to go write a campaign brief or whatnot. And my biggest thing is even though it's not in your day-to-day function, and there's a lot of orgs that do this very well, and there's a lot of orgs that maybe don't do that. Learn how to demo your product, right? Learn how to use it. Learn how to learn where the bells and whistles are whenever there's a product update. I in my current role, I'm very, I sit with the product team on almost all of our sprint meetings, on all of our planning meetings, on all the roadmap meetings. And so when something is in pre-release, because I have access to the lower environment, I go in and I play with the functionality so I can understand how it's going to be used. And then I do some postmortems once it's launched with some of the customer advisory guys that we work with. And then I go and ask them, like, hey, is this functionality meeting your expectation? Is it working? I think a lot of marketers, and sometimes you just get into this operating rhythm where you don't have time, and you're like, all right, we're moving on to the next one because there's always a new campaign. There's always, I gotta go check on my LinkedIn spend. I gotta go look at my Google, whatever it may be. Carve out time to really sit down and know the product, not from just a features functioning standpoint, because that's what you're talking about, not from an outcome standpoint, but actually how your customers are using it, because you're going to see things in there that are going to give you new angles for new angles for campaigns, new touch points that help drive that value, which is ultimately the goal. It may not be, maybe you're doing a campaign, a multi-touch campaign, or an omni-channel campaign that is touching multiple things. Knowing the product at that level is going to give you the insight that you need to pull those threads, or train your bot, train your AI teammate to really know, okay, cool, well, in this use case, and it's going to allow you to map back to personas that much more effectively and really help drive the value, not just at the top of the bow tie, but like all the way through the bow tie. And it's also going to help you. Uh, there's one more thing too. I think a lot of marketers, because they are focusing at the top of the funnel so much, or maybe that mid-level sell funnel, they're missing the opportunity to go and engage with their CS team and understand, hey, and ABM is still the term, but we need to run an expansion play. Like, we have this subset of customers. How is the CS team doing this? And even enabling campaigns. And there's a lot of orgs that are starting to do this very well, right? And they've been doing it for years now, where it's like, all right, I'm going to run a CS-led campaign where we're going to work on expansion and we're going to just work on acquisition. And it's no longer just about driving. I think marketers sometimes fall into this trap, especially early stage, where marketing is just driving the top of the funnel. And I think now marketing as a revenue driving center needs to worry about the entirety of the customer life cycle, and not just that front
Yeah.
front end of it.
A good example of this is we had worked with a client who had already been working with an SEO agency, and then they weren't satisfied with the results. They came to us and they said, we are not satisfied. Why are we not getting any leads? And then we reviewed It was an e-commerce platform. They were selling high-ticket products for health. One of the products was hyperbaric chamber,
Wow.
and basically they were chasing a hyperbaric chamber or chambers or HBots. And then we said, hey guys, we will now optimize your page to rank for hyperbaric chambers for sale or cheap or affordable.
Sure.
Or, like, do that, like move from this broad, because maybe somebody just wants to see how they work, but if they type for sale, then the intent changes.
Yep.
And if you capture that intent, then you will have a higher CTR, conversion rate will be there, and you will like actually convert and have some purchases
Yep.
coming by. So yeah. Now earlier you mentioned enablement and alignment.
Mm-hmm.
So at what point did you realize that clarity, alignment, and enablement, not just product features, were the real growth levers?
I think back when I took over the CS team way back in the day, after I did my stint in product. There we go. Excuse me. And I started building out what the team structure was going to be. Right, there was a big gap in what product was putting out. Right, there was back then in that organization, there was the release notes came out, but there was no real training. So we would get the release, then the release notes would come out the day after, and then there was this mad scramble to understand, okay, what does this functionality do? Is it better? Is it worse? How are we gonna communicate to the client? So that's really started to understand the power of it. And I know that's very basic and very 101, and almost every organization operates that way. But that was where kind of my light bulb moment was, and this was almost 15 years ago at this point. But understanding, the leverage of, hey, product, we need to do some sort of enablement for the people that are the operators that are talking to the clients, because if we roll out a new feature and we're finding out about it at the same time as the clients, we can't effectively answer that communication. So whether it's the release notes come out sooner, or we have, in the way that we did it at an expo back in the day, is we started having a release show internally for the CSMs that was 2 weeks before any release, where we would sit down, we would walk through all of the features in a lower environment, we would show them how it works, let them build an understanding. And then the CS, actually what happened is we had a couple people on the CS team there that were starting to actually write their own documentation, which is a whole different problem in and of itself that organizations face, is people just creating their own documentation that may or may not be right and sending it to clients. But then we were able to identify that gap, which allowed us to loop the support team in, and the support team handled all of the documenting of everything in the product. So they were able to start building things faster. So that way, when the release actually came, the help articles were done. The how-to guides were done. The video walkthroughs at the time were done. And the CS team was not only, because if it was a lot of what we did back then was we were adding features and functionality to the platform, but some of the packages and plans might have changed. So it gave our CSMs who had a quota, they weren't just, they were both quota carrying, but it gave them a path to have a conversation during a QBR or during a renewal cycle on, hey, look, if we modified your contract to do X, Y, and Z, you're going to get this benefit. And here's the outcomes we're seeing across the clients that are already using it, to help drive, we're talking about running webinars and virtual events, right? So it's all about driving engagement and keeping the audience in touching their keyboard. That's what our kind of mantra was there, is you want your audience touching the keyboard at least once a minute, whether it's a question or a poll interaction or something on the screen that you're calling attention to drive that. There's much more eloquent ways to drive engagement now, but back in the barbaric 2010s, that's how we did it.
Yeah, and one person told me that customers use only 20% of that tool's features. Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that?
I think the 20% sounds right. I think it's interesting to think about that, and it's a conversation I've had with my product team over the last, and it's going to continually change, right? And I think a lot of the what I'll call legacy SaaS companies have to really understand there's a lot of new players that are, and this goes back to what I was talking about disruption right earlier in the conversation, is it's not about, it's no longer about what the dashboard is telling you. The decision makers at an organization are looking for the insight, right? Okay, cool. I see that my pipeline is, using sales as an example, my pipeline is weak here. Where are the opportunities for me to fill that? Do I need to go and, cut a different list? Do I need to do this type of campaign? Do I need to go here? Where everything has been for the longest time static and you need somebody to go do that. Now it's surfacing that intelligence in a meaningful way. And this goes back to the earlier thing, like, Jarvis, what do we got on the docket today? Right? Coming in and using sellers as an example is coming in and having that ability for your AI or whatever tooling that you're using to present, like, hey, last week you sent these 3 emails. Do you want me to follow up? You should follow up. And having that teammate there to really help you and guide you, and then presenting that insight and speaking and selling. Like, I think intent data is one of the most powerful things that we have right now, and I've always been reticent to be the seller because I as much as I enjoy being on podcasts and having conversations. I always have considered myself too apathetic to really be a really cutthroat salesperson. But now I think about, if I need to go into sales, having an always on AI teammate that is running these things in the back for me and warming these things up and having these conversations, like, man, what a time to be a seller
Yeah, exactly.
nowadays. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah, and I want to also ask another follow-up question. So I've noticed that I see an ad on Instagram for a SaaS, and it really like paints me the picture about what the tool does and how can the tool help me. And then I open the tool, I start the onboarding, and the onboarding tells me the completely different thing, and I just like bounce. So was there a moment where you saw a great product fail because the story wasn't clear? And what would you say is the common mistake that these SaaS tools are making, which ultimately leads them to fail?
Yeah, so I think authenticity and being open about,
Okay.
and being there's a lot of people have I think there was a point in time in the last like 6 years where everybody was very much on the hype train and marketing became this like hype engine. And a lot of that was driven by the example you just gave, right? And I'll go back to what I was talking about with like Claude or Perplexity or everything. Like the rise of, I think ultimately what I'm getting at is the rise of influencer marketing, I think is a lot of the driver. And I'm not saying that influencer marketer is bad in any way. I think it has its place in the funnel, and there's an appropriate time and place to use it. But you have to very much keep what I said earlier is what is the outcomes that what are the expected outcomes, and talk to those, right? And that's where you should build your value propositions around it. And that's how you should talk about it in the market is, these are the outcomes that we're seeing. These are the successes our customers are having. And this is how they did it versus, hey, here's these 17 features and functionality. In my former life, there was a product that we tried to roll out that was a marketing planning tool. And this is something that was back in the agency that we were doing. And the theory behind it is a kind of democratization of how you plan your marketing from the bottom up, top down, and then everybody eats in the middle. In reality, while that was amazing on paper, it missed some of because it was very marketing focused. It didn't get buy-in from the rest of the org. And now, granted, this was a long time ago when marketing was very much its own silo, where I would argue now that it is, marketing is a one of the most cross-functional teams in the org now, or has to be, to make sure that you're getting all of the value stories. But that did not go over well because we made some assumptions about how people were planning and how people were buying, and we didn't really spend the time understanding product market fit and where this went in and how people were doing it. We just kind of assumed this is something they needed, which that's a big, that's a huge thing now is, make sure that what the problem you're solving is you're actually solving it in a way that everybody can use it. Because I think, and ego plays a lot into that as well, right? We all have our own internal biases and things like that. But you have to, weigh that against everything
Yeah.
across the board.
Yeah, it's a very good explanation. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
So I want to move to some other topics. You're known for turning complex platforms into clear revenue-driven stories. I saw your LinkedIn, like turning complexity into revenue makes sense. So like, what usually breaks when companies try to explain sophisticated products to the market, and like, where do teams tend to overcomplicate things?
Yeah. So, understanding that, and this goes back to my comment about ego, right? Is you're building a new app or a new widget or something like that, and you are hyper passionate about it. You think it is the best thing on the face of the planet. Not everybody's going to do that. And I have a great, any idea I come up with, I immediately tell my wife and I have been together since we were 16, right? So we're high school sweethearts. So she's, we're, very blunt, and she's very much, I'll give her an idea and she goes, no, 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 no. So that's kind of my litmus test. But really understanding, and going back to, being able to curtail your ego in a way that you're able to, really take the feedback and then craft and then mold the clay, right? So everybody, if you think about it as a sculpture, everybody starts with a block and they get it to one thing. But then there's always somebody that's going to come around and say, well, the arm should be here, or their face is a little messed up, things like that, is where I've kind of figured out along my journey. And then going back to, streamlining the complex. I have a lot of people that think I'm the smartest person in the room. I'm really not, right? I'm usually if we're ever in a scenario where there's a group of people, I'm usually the last person to talk. I'm not unless it's my meeting and I'm running the meeting, right? But
They say wise people, they are not, like, they are quiet.
yeah, I try to observe and listen to understand, what is the problem we're solving, and then it goes back to, and I sound a little bit like a broken record, is, stop worrying about the bells and whistles in the product, right? Because everybody has a dashboard, everybody has a widget, everybody can do this and that. And, if I think back way in earlier in our conversation, and, that's what AI is bringing to the table. It's how is your platform solving the problem, and what is the expected outcome that what is the outcome your customer is going to get from buying your solution? That is more valuable now than it ever has been before. But then, I think about the company I'm working with right now. They have a lot of technical jargon on their website, a lot of high level thinking that if I'm an insurance, they're in the insurance broker space. If I'm an insurance agent and I come to the website and I look at something that says our AI is a data centric, layer driven, hyperflux capacitor that once you hit 80 miles an hour, it's going to go, and you're going to be able to, bend time, space, and reality. I've moved on, right? Because it doesn't tell me how it's going to make my life easier. It doesn't speak to that. And just understanding those couple of things and always looking at it from the outcome perspective allows you to pluck those narrative threads, and build better content, build better, even, with what you guys do, it allows you to build better organic search and organic search, paid search, whatever it may be. And I think that becomes even more when you layer in, and you and I have talked about this before, some of the AEO and the GEO stuff that's happening, right? Like how are you breaking that down in your schema for very simple context, so that way when somebody comes to a platform and says, hey, what's the best hyperbaric chamber on the market, you have that simple breakdown so that the LLM can give you the most appropriate answer and get it there. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. I also interviewed a guy who interviewed 1,000 users of his SaaS tool in 1 year, and he told
wow.
me the biggest issue I see here is that everybody wants to tell me to do something, to implement something. Some ideas they are cool and we will consider them, but most of them they just tell you stupid ideas that you just like you need to know how to differentiate like realistic improvement suggestions from the ones that are not very
Right.
realistic.
Yep.
So yeah, props to people who can do that in this sea of like 1,000 suggestions that they get from those users.
What a
So
1,000
what's
interviews
the
a year. That's I need to have a conversation with him about how he got all of those
Yeah, you
customers.
can look for him, Tom Winter. He runs SEO Wind.
Okay.
It's the content writing AI tool.
Yep.
You can also find our podcast on my
Yeah,
YouTube
I'm gonna have to go
channel.
check that
So
out.
you can, yeah, cool. So my next question, we're getting slowly to the close of the podcast,
Yep.
to the end of the podcast, but I do want to ask you a few more questions.
Sure.
This is very interesting question also because it's something that comes when you need to do a proper marketing. You need to have a proper messaging, like your message speaks your product. So what's the most common mistake you see in enterprise messaging?
I think it goes back to not understanding the outcome of your product, right? You're just talking about features and functionality. You're not telling a story.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
how do you how do you and it's messaging is probably one of the hard, setting up an email drip campaign, doing that, but really being a consistent writer. And I think a lot of organizations that I've talked to and my peers around the orgs, it's how do we get that customer data to really tell the story of the outcome, which is a big challenge, right? If you're a startup or your early stage company, you're not going to have the customer data to really tell that story, right? So how do you then drive that messaging there? Well, what are your stories, right? I think there's one organization that I'm talking to is you have if you're a organization that's small, 10, sub 50 people, you have amazing stories inside of your org. Why, go and do some UCG and start generating that content. Get your and I'm not saying that there are many people in our organization that don't want to be on camera, or maybe shouldn't be on camera. But find those people in your org that can tell the story in a human way and make it a connection, right? Ultimately, we're not to the world yet where AI is buying from AI. People still very much buy from people. So drive that messaging home and talk to all of your, if you've only got a couple of customers, you should be engaging with them to begin with because you're small and you're building. But if you're an enterprise, right, engage with your people. They've got amazing stories that they can tell on camera, or have them. One of the things I did at another company is we had a guest blog spotlight, right, where we would come up with a rotating. We had a list of topic ideas, and we would go to the support team, or we would go to the the sales team, or the CS team, or the product team, and say, "Hey guys, we want you to write the blog this month. Here's the list of topics that fit inside of the monthly theme. What do you want to write?" And everybody wanted to write. Now, not everybody could write.
That's a very smart idea. Yeah.
Not everybody could write. However, it was something that went over very well. And then all of a sudden, we had the voices of the organization talking about the success stories that they've had, and whether that was an internal success story or something they did with a customer, it doesn't matter because it's authentic. It's authentic, right? And that goes back to people buy from people, and they want to see that. And the more things you can do especially now in the AEO and GEO world where you're creating that content and that's really what they're triggering and keying in on to build those answers is the more authentic you can be and the show the human in the loop side of it. I think that's a big piece of the success.
Yeah, I mean, a very smart advices and very good findings that you just shared. I also want to add up something that I
Yeah.
learned from one of the previous podcast guests about the messaging. Maybe it will also be useful for you as well. But I do like learning about all these things directly from you. As for example, when you said this phrase, you're not selling product, you're selling relationship and the outcome. That's like I will remember that like forever, you know. And thank you for like telling me things like that and
Hmm.
sharing your knowledge and experience with me, as I'm really willing to learn and just absorb everything. So there was this guy Trevor Longino. He's from Montreal and he runs sales agency, like a marketing agency,
Hmm.
let's call it. And very smart guy, like 150 IQ plus. Like he knows a lot. Like he worked with Electronic Arts and
Oh, wow.
big companies, etc. Yeah, and what the guy told me about the messaging, he has a unique way of like testing messages. He holds these minimum viable sprints
Uh-huh.
or MVS. So basically, he puts 5 different messages in like blank backgrounds and he runs Facebook ads. And basically, your Facebook ad is just like a one sentence or a message with
Yeah.
like a blank like background, plain
Yeah.
background, and he's checking which one performs the best, and then when he finds the one he uses for your website, he creates the whole landing page, runs meta Google ads, things like that. You can also learn about this if you watch some of the reels or the episodes.
No, that's
Very
yeah,
smart idea.
that's super interesting. I'm gonna have to go check that out for sure. That's
So you pay like $500 for 5 messages,
yeah.
so $100 each, and you will see that which one brought you the highest traction, and you can use it. And he says, founders, they always give me their 5 ideas, and my 5 ideas will always beat all the five
Sure.
that they suggested. It's crazy, but like he knows how to approach this, and
Yeah,
like
and I think that's
yeah.
interesting too, and that's kind of what I was going back from ego, right? Is you have to, as a founder, you tend to, and I'm going, I'm going through this exercise right now with the thing the deal that I'm starting up is I have to step out, and luckily I have a very good peer mentor network where I've sent the website copy and everything that I'm putting out there to them, but it's really setting aside your ego and almost playing the role of the foil in your own destiny where you're going to, and I think that's actually a brilliant idea that I'm kind of sad that I never thought about that. Because if you can hit your messaging and the wording right on a blank ad that's just text, that's
Yeah.
that's pretty great.
Yeah, then you know it will work.
Yep,
And
exactly.
like when they like overcomplicate the messaging and you obviously see it, like what the F is this, like what is this messaging, how do you decide what not to say when simplifying a message without dumbing it down? Like how do you choose what to cut? Like what's harder, adding clarity or removing noise? Like how
I,
do you do it?
I think adding clarity can always be done, but it's a balancing act, right? You're adding to your point is if you add too much clarity, it almost seems unreal. So it's really that fine line of balance on, and that's I think again I'm thinking about the minimum viable sprint now and how I can incorporate that into
Yeah.
my world. But I think it's really an A/B testing, or even ABC testing, right? Where you're doing in that fashion the five, Facebook ads. Um, you know, it's I think it goes back to, being as authentic as you can in the written word, which is sometimes, people get in their own head about it and they're like, oh, this sounds really good. I used the right words here, the right comma, there's no red lines underneath. I'm not getting a blue line suggesting that I put a semicolon here when there obviously shouldn't be. But I think it's really just boiling down to the root concept on what, you know, what are you trying to solve? How are you solving it? And who are you solving it for in any template is the best way to do it. And a lot of that comes down to like really knowing your audience, and knowing, and not just the audience, but the medium in which they're consuming it, right? Is it LinkedIn, where a lot of people are reading, the blog posts or the stuff that they put up there, out there? Is it one of these things where you're going to do a video, right? Because video is very, very easy. And I think a lot of people with video fall into the trap of, I have to sit down and I have to, my lighting has to be perfect, or I've got to be in a studio or stuff like that. That ship has sailed, right? There's a time and a place for highly polished and highly produced videos. Yes, I'm not disagreeing with that. But a lot of people just want to hear and see somebody talking and walking around on their phone. Like there's a gentleman that I work with who has an amazing TikTok. He's a GM dealer. His Benzes and bow ties is the TikTok, but he goes live, sits down, cameras on him, and he's just having conversations with his dealers, with his salespeople, and um, talking in there. So
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I understand. Like somebody else is gonna do it before you if you just like if you keep like postponing all the video recording. And as I was doing, to be honest, like for the last 2 months, I really had like a huge pause from creating content. But like at the end of the day, creating, not consuming. Like it's better to create than consume. Of course, yes, you should consume high quality stuff that's complementary to what you're doing and can significantly help you. But like creating will bring much more value back to your business in terms of ROI and all the things that you want to achieve.
Yep.
I have 3 last
Yeah.
questions for you. So first question would be like to sum everything up is like what separates product marketing that looks good on slides from product marketing that actually wins deals?
That is I've never heard that question phrased that way before. I think the biggest thing for me anyway in my world that separates product from marketing is knowing your audience, right? Understanding the persona of who you're selling to. Everything can look good on, and this is something that's gotten a lot easier now where you can create a good agent and have your personas all in there and say, I need something that speaks to this persona. But knowing your company's identity, knowing your story, and then really crafting that down to who you're talking to, right? And there's so many people who, you probably get, so many emails on a given day where there's no research done, there's no time to understand. And that doesn't go just for the PowerPoint deck, it goes for the initial outreach, whether it's cold or not. Like, take the time to understand who you are writing your email to. It's so easy that everybody's online in this world. Unless you are, and there even some of there's some HVAC companies, and we're starting to see the B2B world and the B2C that transcend into the home services space in a big way. Um, Understand your audience, understand, who they are, and then take all of that messaging framework that you put together and pressure test it, right? And like I said, I use my wife for everything. If I write a new messaging document, and I give it to her and she gets it, I know that that's kind of my minimum viable sprint, right? Is I hand it to my wife, because my wife was an elementary school teacher for a very, very long time and an educator.
The wife test.
Yeah, exactly. She doesn't, the wife test. She doesn't live in this world, but if I can hand her a document and she can read through it and she goes, yeah, I get it. I understand what this does. Then I'm like, all right, cool. That means that everybody in the world that I actually live in should be able to do that. Or should be able to get
Exactly,
it.
man. That's so smart
Yeah,
advice. I mean, I used to do something similar. I call it the mom test. So I give something to my mom,
exactly.
and then I see how, like, any idea that I have, like, for example, Hey mom, I want to. Would you like to have like a cooking application where you can see all the recipes, you can scroll? And she was like, like when I prepare food, my hands are all dirty and I can't use my phone. So like, there goes your idea. Don't do that. Like so things like that, or how they use ChatGPT or things like that. So
Yep.
I understand better. Like when my mom, like she was like, she forgot if she took a pill, and she said, if can I take two of these pills? I don't remember if I took it. And then when I asked her, like she needed to book a haircut in our city, she typed hairstyle in city name in Google, and I was like, oh, so Google for local results. For questions like this, you use ChatGPT.
Yep.
So like you can really extract a lot of thinking from this. And what you just said, basically, it's what you explained. I think that's the main difference between pretty enablement and effective
Yes.
enablement. So, my second question would be, since you've led teams across product marketing, enablement, customer facing roles in these complex environments, what qualities matter most in strong go to market leaders today? Is it more like about experience or judgment?
No,
Like
so
what's hardest to
I think
you
in my opinion, right, and
Mm-hmm.
this is, I think coachability, right? Even though
Oh,
you're a leader,
coachability.
you still
Okay.
have to be you still have to be able to, and then there it takes in the product marketing role, it takes a certain set of you have to be very empathetic. And you because and when I say that, I don't mean in the sense of like I can understand your feelings. You have to be empathetic in the fact that there are 800,000 in any given day conflicting priorities across the organization. So how do you duck and weave and dodge and dive through those in a way that makes you that is going to get drive to the outcome that you're driving to? So whether that is at a basis level, like, hey, we've got a new product coming out, I need to train the CSMs, the support team, the account managers on how this is going to be and how it's going to change their world for the better. So that goes back to earlier what I was saying is understanding on your CX journey and your customer journey map is right, not only mapping out the journey of the customer, but how does that layer onto the employee experience of customer onboarding? Does this feature have that? Like really understanding those through lines in the narrative thread will help you be a more effective leader on that. And then you going back to my foil comment, right? Like sometimes you have to product marketers tend to be some of the smartest people in the room, but be the dumbest person in the room. Ask the questions, right? Ask it doesn't matter how, like, there are, I'll sit on brainstorming sessions with product where I ask 75 different questions, or like a sprint planning meeting where I'm asking 75 different questions and I know that they want, the meeting's 5 minutes over, but asking the questions from an angle that you are thinking more like as sitting in the product marketing seat, you tend to think more like the customer than you realize. So ask the questions that the customer might ask the questions that the CSM might ask, because you are their voice. One of my old mentors, and I'm going to butcher this, I said old mentors, but my older mentors, you are very much you are the voice, you are the internal voice of the customer and the external voice
Mm-hmm.
of the company when you are the product marketer.
Mm.
And that's one of those things.
Nicely said.
Yeah, and that's one of those things where you've got to balance that equation on advocate for the customers internally with what they need to do, and then drive forward, what the company that messaging out externally. So
Yeah, and I want to circle back and tell you that being the dumbest person in the room puts you in the best environment for you. So, as long as you are the dumbest person in the room, that's the best environment for you, as you're going to grow and improve with all the smarter people.
yep.
And then you're going to outsmart them, outgrow them, and just move to another room where you're going to be again the dumbest
Yeah,
person
and I think
and just grow and grow and
yeah, and
grow.
I think that's I try to always be a sponge. And then that's for anybody who's starting the product marketing journey, or getting into this boat. I'm not a classically trained product marketer by any means. I did not start on the marketing team. I did not grow into this role. I kind of naturally evolved into it, because it checks all the boxes of, like I said at the beginning of the podcast. I get to play with the product, I get to play with the tooling, I get to play with the campaigns, I get to
Yeah,
touch all the things I like. And it
yeah,
really is, and this is maybe some of the most generic advice ever, but never stop learning. There's always something out there, that is going to give you, and it's not just looking at your competitor stack and learning from them, but go cross industry, right? How is product, if you're in the healthcare space, how is the software space handling product marketing? How is the home services, managing GTM, right? Go and read, listen to podcasts, but don't just stick with product marketing focused stuff. I think one of the things that makes product marketing so cool, or even just like this new concept, associate of mine, at this consultant, Revenge Consulting, told me, brought up, is this concept of a GTM engineer, right? Which is very much a product marketer, very much a sales oriented person. The product marketing team is that go to market engineer. They're the ones that are engineering the flow, or I would change engineer to architect. They're building that flow from product to marketing to outward messaging to how our sellers are enabled to go do this, and architecting that path, and really just kind of drive into that.
yeah. I mean, makes sense. And like considering the stage you're at, yeah. I mean, considering the ages of experience and everything, it can be hard to be the dumbest person in the room, because like a lot of things already went through your head and you learned a lot. But yeah, we always try to like adjust to every situation and environment. So my last question would be, and I do have another one, but that's, we're gonna keep it short.
Sure.
It's the question I ask to every guest. But like now, when with all the AI like evolving every day, market is growing like with it, so it's also evolving as fast as the AI, and we're all trying to adjust to it, to accept it and use it as a tool. Looking ahead, what excites you most about where product marketing and go-to-market strategy are heading next? Maybe like what trends are you paying closest attention to, and what do you think GTM teams will need to get much
I,
better at?
I think it is, going back to what we said, is right now the biggest trend that I'm following is the data layer, right? I think that's where the biggest wins are going to be. And I think product marketing, the fastest win for any product marketer is making sure that your CRM is in order, making sure that your ICP definitions are on your account, at your account level, at your contact level, making sure that your data is architected in a way. And this is where that cross functionality, and a lot of organizations are just now starting this journey, right? Make sure that your systems are aligned at that brain level. And I would argue that the product marketing or the GTM architect or whatever is the person that needs to be doing this in the org, because they're seeing it from the product side, they're seeing it from the customer side, and everything else in between. You are poised to drive that transformation and get that data layer right where it is and needs to be in a centralized location. And there's a lot of great companies, and whether that is, your CRM or your map or whatever it is, or if you're using like a Tableau or a Snowflake or a Databricks or something like that, or any of the CDPs that are out there, the Teliums or, things along those lines, making sure that data layer is there and intact. So that way, when you start layering on this tooling on top of it and working the flows on how to get in and out, and where to leverage this, the brain is solid, right? Because if you've got a hole in the brain that is your customer data, anything that you produce is going to be half baked, at best.
Yeah, thank you so much for elaborating and for answering all the
You
questions
bet.
that I had for you in this podcast. I believe that we could talk for much longer, but let's just wrap it up with the last question. If you and I both stop existing tomorrow and you had to leave this audience with one piece of advice, what would you tell them?
Spend time with family, right? We all get bogged down, and I'm a big proponent of this. Right? We all get bogged down in the 9 to 5, and what would seem like the 24-hour work cycle these days. And I'm an OG work from homer, right? I've not been in an office since 2013. So for 13 years now, I've been working from home. Step away. Whatever problem is at work is going to be there tomorrow. Whatever there is to solve is going to be there to solve. And missing something that is a milestone in your family's life, whether that is a first day of kindergarten or anything else, is not worth anything you're doing in the office.
Oh man, I can relate so much. You made me like I got a goosebumps when you said that because like I do have a 2-year-old boy and I have another boy on the way that will be born in October. God
Oh,
bless.
congratulations.
So two boys. Yeah, thank you so much. And I really know like I appreciate my time with my family a lot, and I do think that, as you said, just leave the work. Nothing's gonna change in 24 hours.
Yep.
People gonna wait you, so yeah, don't miss these opportunities because they only happen once and your work is there every day.
Yep, exactly.
So yeah, first of all, Eric, I want to thank you for joining to the podcast and also considering the 8-hour time difference you adjusted. So
Yep.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
You went like you started a bit early. I also added a bit later, so we both gave something.
Love it.
So yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all the nuggets of wisdom, all the useful advice that every marketer, product marketer, and salesperson, can relate with, and I'm sure that everybody can learn from you. So thank you for that, guys. Don't forget to follow Eric on LinkedIn. He started his hybrid class with double S at the end. So make sure to follow him. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast for listening more people like Eric. Once again, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
You bet. Take care.